Okay, hi, welcome back to Foundations of Bioenergetics. This is number 2 in the series. My name is Devraj, and today we're going to be looking at the bow and arch postures. These are indeed a foundation of bioenergetics. You know, they're probably the two most dominant postures that most people would use, dominant in the sense of using them a lot. Let's just take a very quick look at the postures, just in case you have no idea just in case you don't know what they look like, and then I can explain a little bit of the psychology around them. First one, bow, looks roughly like this, and the second one, the arch, looks roughly like this. Now this bow posture, where you're standing up, leaning back with your arms up, on a psychological level, it kind of represents being able to take a position for yourself, to be able to stand up at 90 degrees on the earth and speak your truth, walk your truth. So in a way, it's kind of the antithesis of the kind of pleaser archetype, someone who's learned to survive by fitting into their environment and who's not too concerned about, what their real feelings are, what their real position is in life. It's the antidote to that, basically. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, with the arch posture leaning forwards, it's more like surrendering to what's going on around you. So in terms of very simple human psychology, we need to feel confident with both of these two positions, not just physically, but emotionally in life. Confident to take a position for ourselves, even though we may get resistance, even though other people may not agree with us, and confident also, to just go with the flow and to experience, to not have to feel like, I need to be rigidly in control of my entire environment 24/7. So that's a little bit of psychological background here. Now let's take a look at the actual postures in more detail. And also, before we get started, remember, like in number 1 of this series, we were talking about the importance of breathing. So remember that. There can be a tendency to want to kind of, charge into the posture and completely forget about the fact that we're meant to be breathing at a reasonable depth. So that said, let's take a look at our bow posture. I'll try and do it at a good angle. Now, feet position is important here. So your feet ideally want to be around shoulder width apart, or maybe a little wider if that feels better for you. Your knees should definitely be bent. That's super important in bioenergetics. And the outsides of your feet should be roughly parallel. You don't need to, if that's uncomfortable to get the outsides of your feet parallel, then you don't need to get it perfect. It's not that important. But, you shouldn't be splaying them too much, basically. Okay, so that's our kind of lower body position with the feet like that and the knees slightly bent. And then upper body position, we begin from having our arms right up above our head with our palms facing forwards. So roughly like that. And then in one movement to go into the bow, we press the pelvis forwards. So that's one push. And we squeeze the arms back. So like this really. Pressing the pelvis forwards, squeezing the arms back. Generally, you'll feel some tension around the shoulder blades or between the shoulder blades, which is good. And then in this posture, breathe and feel your body. Now, with this actual demonstration of a posture, it's good to understand something about bioenergetics, which is it's quite different from yoga in a certain way, in that the posture is not wildly important. Of course, it's important, but what's important in the posture is that you're pushing in the right places. Not that you're doing it the same as someone on YouTube or whatever, it's that you're pushing in the right places. And this is particularly evident with the bow posture because for some people, their mid-back mobility will be very high and they will lean, I'm not in that category at all, they will lean right back a long way. And if you're in that category, which is maybe 5 to 10% of people, I would say, in my experience, then you may need to come up a little bit. But if that's really leaning right back, like almost you can go back to almost like a right angle, from the back of your legs to your back. Assuming you're not in that category, then all you really need to do is just press in those two areas, and you've got the posture correct. As long as you remember to keep your knees to keep a little bit of flex in your knees, then you've got the posture correct. Now, another aspect of a posture is head position. Some teachers would prefer to have you have your head upright. For the school I learned from, or the teachers I learned from, you kept your head looking straight forward. In reality, it doesn't matter tons, but it's good not to fiddle with things too much. So if you've really been doing the bow for a long time in one specific position, you can look at a few changes, but you don't want to be one of these guys that just needs to change and fiddle with things all the time, because you won't be able to get development like that with this kind of therapy. So, you start by really surrendering to what the teacher says, and then at some point, you kind of develop a way of working yourself. That's kind of how it works. So we're in this position, my head is upright. So really, this bow comes from the idea that it's shaped like an archer's bow. I'm putting my body, it's not particularly shaped like that, but that's the idea. The arms should remain pretty much straight, palms facing forward, squeezing back, feeling that tension there. That's something that people will often, when they're beginners, let slip. And then this nice deep breathing, so you can hear the exhale, pressing forward, squeezing back, and that's my bow posture basically. Now, just to briefly cover a few variations here. For people who have limited upper arm, shoulder mobility, or something going on with their arms, there's a version where you can make kind of gentle fists and put them into your lower back, and then do it like this. Make sure your elbows are kind of pointing a bit backwards, and then breathe and feel like this. That's one, very legitimate variation. I think this one is stronger when you start, but if you have mobility issues up here, then feel free to try this one. The reason this one is so strong is because it really does stretch into this complex of tension around the lower neck and shoulder blades. Other variations which are useful include, like I mentioned, the angle of the head, but also opening the mouth wide or opening the eyes wide. When you're really grounded in this posture, like you've been doing it for 3 months or something like that on a daily basis, along with the arch, the counter stretch, then feel free to experiment with that stuff. I don't recommend to start experimenting, because like I said, it's hard to get development if you keep changing things, because these postures on a deep level will be confrontational to your nervous system, and it needs to be doing it a specific way rather than a way that you think is right. So variations include the mouth wide open, like it could be like. This is a jaw stretch, which we're adding in there. If you try the jaw stretch, you will need to really check, for the length of time that you do it, that you're keeping your jaw fully wide. It's very easy to slacken off a few millimeters and take it a bit easy, but that's not really going to give you much with the jaw stretch. It can be a very powerful exercise, but you do need to keep your mouth really super wide. The other variation, which you could also add to the jaw stretch if you want to, is eyes wide open. Opening the eyes very wide and breathing and feeling your body is one way that we can start to release some shock from our system, because eyes wide open is associated with shock. If you ever see a cartoon, like if someone just about to be in a car crash, their eyes will be wide open, So you could also do. Because the eyes wide open can be so evocative, really do check that you're breathing to a decent depth and that you're feeling your body when you do it. You're not just dissociating and going off into your own world. Good to check that. Now, as to the timing with the bow and the arch, I recommend you start on something like a 1 or 1.5 minute ding, and that you do 3 reps. We'll look at the arch in a moment, but that means you're up in your bow for 1.5 minutes or a minute, and then you transition into your arch, and then you continue for 3 reps. So if it's a 1 minute ding, that would take 6 minutes in total. If you're doing that, it's good not to take a break. Don't take a break. If it's really too much, then reduce the ding time. If you want ding tracks, you can download those from my website, bioenergetics.org.uk, for nothing at all, and you just set them on your music player to repeat constantly, and then it will just ding at that time length until you tell it to stop. Okay, next point. Let's get to the arch posture. So we've been in our bow, up like this, and the ding's gone. And then what you do is you straighten your body, and then you relax your arms, and then you bring your feet a bit closer together. The arch works best when your feet are more like, depending on your height, maybe a foot apart, 30 centimeters, something like that. And then from standing, you allow your chin to drop to your chest, and you slowly hang forwards. Now, if you're quite flexible, you don't need to go down so far that your fingers reach the floor. This is quite an important point that I'll pick up in a minute. And if you're not super flexible, then you just go down as far as you can. And then in this posture, you breathe and feel the body. let's take a quick look at a couple of, in fact, 3 slightly important points of this posture. One is that it's very common for people when they're new to bio to pull their head up a bit, or maybe to stretch their arms towards their legs. You know, it looks weird like this, but people do this. And this is a way that the mind is trying to keep control. It's trying to lock everything off so that it doesn't have to feel anything in your lower body. Not consciously, it's nervous system mediated. So you don't want to do that. Now, to prevent that from happening, and this is important, give your head a little swirl, give your arms a little swirl, so that this part of your body is kind of like a rag doll. This is super important. The second important point is don't let your knees be too bent in this posture. So you want them more like just slightly, tiny bit of flex in there. That's important. That really stretches parts of your back more. Now, the third aspect of a posture, which you don't have to use, but if you're really into it, you could, is to lean a little bit forward. So there's more weight towards your toes than your heels, leaning a little bit forwards. Okay, so those are 3 important aspects of a posture. Something to say about this posture is it can be, when you start out, very evocative on your lower back, and you don't want to pull your lower back. You know, it's great to work for lower back, but you have to take it easy. It's important because when we have a conscious sensation of our lower back in our day-to-day just experience of being in the body, being in the world, we will feel much more natural support inside of us. It's like a sensation of security. But for most people, sensation in the lower back is one of the first things that goes, even teenage years, it's gone. So we want to open those muscles back up again and be able to feel them, but because it's such an important area and there can be so much in there, you need to take it gently. So if you're hanging in your arch posture and you feel like, oh my God, my lower back's going to pull, you don't want to just cling on. You don't want to just cling on. You can take the pressure off a little bit by putting your hands or your elbows on your knees to take the pressure off the lower back. Do that for a few seconds and then try again. So you make sure you don't pull your lower back. That's important. Okay, now let's look at people who can stretch a long way, like some people who practice yoga a lot, or they just have like a lot of mobility around this area. They can go super flat against the body. And you know, you might think, wow, they're doing it really well or something like that, but actually that's not so useful in this type of stretch. You know, the focus is not on flexibility. This is an interesting point. Often when you start something like bioenergetics, and maybe you've done some yoga or Pilates or whatever, you think, you know, the objective is to get a real flexibility in your body, but actually that's not the case. You know, sometimes bits of your body will be very, very tense for a while, and sometimes then they will untense. It's like a journey. You know, it's a journey, and you can't just say because someone's super flexible that they have a high level of psychological health. Often they don't at all. So this is a kind of complex area that, you know, maybe one day in the future scientists will investigate and stuff, but for now it's good to understand that simply being super flexible is not necessarily mean that you're psychologically especially healthy. So with this one in particular, some people who can hang down a long way, they will then put their arms like this, cross their arms. But you shouldn't do this basically. Your fingertips should be off the floor with your arms fully stretched. And if you have to come up a little bit to do that, that's okay. That will increase the stretch on different areas of your mid and lower back, and that's useful. So that's another important point to remember. You know, don't just go into your yoga kind of front fold. That's not going to be beneficial here. Okay, so we've looked at our bow and our arch, and we've looked at various details of the posture, a few points of kind of body-based psychology and some stuff to watch out for. The other thing that's very important is to finish off your session, you know, in the right way, because as we'll see in the next episode of this series, it's really all about expanding our sensation of the body. You know, that's what the whole thing is about. That's what bioenergetics and these breathwork techniques that I may introduce a bit later on. That's what they're all about. We're trying to expand the level of sensation in the body. Now, this is characteristic to myself and a few other practitioners out there, so it's not that everybody in bioenergetics is trying to expand the sensation of your body more. You know, they may be doing that, but they may be more orientated towards normal kind of traditional psychology or talk therapy or something like that. But the way I teach is really just kind of, okay, it's all about expanding your sensation of the body. So what's very important with relevance to this is that you have a little bit of time at the end to just lie down or sit down if you really want to, but lying is better, and just feel your body. So for example, how that would look with the bow and the arch here, like you might want to commit to do this for a month. I would recommend if you're new to bio, you do that. You start with like a minute or minute and a half ding, check the two postures, how long can you easily, keep your breathing fairly deep while you're holding them and not get pain. And then say that's like a minute and a half, that's kind of on the edge for you, but you can do it. You do 3 reps at a minute and a half. So that means up in the bow a minute and a half, down in the arch for a minute and a half, round 3 times, that'll be 9 minutes. And then you take 2 more dings, another 3 minutes. You lie down flat on the floor, no longer paying any attention to your breathing with your eyes closed, and you just tune into the sensation of your body for 2 more dings and then you're complete. Okay, now I mentioned about their pain, and I think that's an important thing to put in. It's quite common when you work with bioenergetics, because we're working with, it, so to speak, the emotional body, that emotional pain comes up or anger comes up. And this is, of course, as long as it's not overwhelming, then this is okay. You allow that, you just allow it to happen. If physical pain is coming up, the way I teach is that you don't need to go really into physical pain. There are, from the old days, some practitioners who would go through physical pain, that's up to them. But for me, you don't really need to go into physical pain. If you're really getting physical pain, then you need to check, maybe you need to do it a little bit less, or maybe you need to move on to a different posture. It's not right for you right now. If it's really physically painful, then, you don't need to persist with it. That said, if it's discomfort, because there will be discomfort, try to breathe through the discomfort. The first manifestation of discomfort, we lock up the throat. We clamp down our breathing, and this isn't healthy. It locks it into the body. It locks energy back into the body. So you're up in your bow position, and it's like, oh my God, I wish this was over. It's really, really uncomfortable. Try to breathe a little bit more deeply and see if something moves and changes. Same with the arch. Okay, so I also mentioned like time lengths that you might want to do this exercise for, and I do recommend, if you're just getting into bio, that you maybe give it a try for a month, every day, or 6 days a week for a month, maybe even 3 months. These are the kind of time frames that I'm usually working around with bioenergetics. It's not like, we do this for a day and then that for a day. We're working on a kind of monthly time frame, basically. So just prepare yourself for that. Great stuff. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back with more foundations of bioenergetics next week. And don't forget to check out my website if you feel to, bioenergetics.org.uk. Thank you.